You know, like they're all in your face.
Let's see. So, can you turn on the? Yeah, you can do that.
Show me all this stuff. You think?
The YouTube.
That?
Yeah, yeah.
What do you mean you did?
So, let me phone. Let me turn on the TikTok.
I don't know nothing about that stuff, so you don't have to tell me to turn it on or whatever. Yes.
Yeah. Point it at me. Point it at the thing. Then turn it around and put it in the.
Okay, yeah, you got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
This way?
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah.
It's the whole point. It's their whole that is. It's a little bit home day. It's also just the tension of whether or not they're going to get together. Finance meeting. Talking about my adventures with Superman. The new Superman show that just came out. Yeah. I mean, they look really similar.
But even they're personality are similar.
I mean, it's not like they changed her hair. It's like, well, this is always acted like that.
Yes, they have. But yeah, I mean, maybe basically just.
I never watched Owl House.
Is the camera right?
Camera should be.
Fixing this.
I'm sure they'll fix it.
How you folks doing?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Guys, what time is your panel starting?
9:15.
Okay, cool. I'm not sure if a volunteer came by to check on your audio.
Yep, they did. She was right here.
Cool. Yep.
Yeah, sure. So live video. Just put on live.
Oh, when I get ready.
Yeah. So put this on your mind. So live video.
You got everything that's set up?
I do. Yeah, no, you can sit right there. Yeah. Is this room? It's
We're gonna have to do that. We never
So when you go live, make sure you turn around and get the crowd. Okay. When you go live, make sure you turn around and get the crowd. Get the crowd. Get the turn around and get the people when you shoot the live. Is this room always this dark? Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, so just like so you shoot, just get the room, turn around and get the room, and then get me some and get yeah. Yeah, this is dark material, so we don't need the room to be that dark. No, I'm kidding. I mean, we know politics is a cesspool, so I think we need to lighten the room up a little bit. Good. That's excellent. Thank you. Yeah, we're good. Huh? Yeah, roughly. So you guys be gentle. This is my first panel ever. So you guys be gentle. Thank you. Thank you. So this is my little pandemic baby that I'm debuting here. In isolation, this idea came to me to do. So I bought a mic off Amazon, and here I am 3 years later at a con. So hey, anything can happen, right? Okay, so I don't know what the time is, but we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you for coming, everybody. My name is Michael Holmes. This is Superhero Politics Podcast. And just like thank you so much. Just like I was saying earlier, I had this idea during the pandemic. I was talking to a friend about the state of the country. And, she couldn't believe what was going on. And I said, well, there's comic book references to that. And so the reason why Superhero Politics is born is I'm a veteran of politics. I've been in it since I was 15, worked on my first political campaign when I was 15 years old. I've collected more than 80,000 and traded more than 80,000 comic books in my life. And so early on, I noticed the parallels between what was happening in comic books and what was happening in real life and vice versa. And so I am an elected official. I am actually a politician. I'm in office right now in High Point, North Carolina. I serve on city council. I was elected in 2019. So therefore, the Superhero Politics. Thank you. I'm up for re-election this year. So homesforhighpoint.com if you want to check out my campaign. But I, as you can see, have loved comic books my whole life and have been working in politics my whole life because I believe that if there's one superpower that everyone has, it's the ability to vote and to affect change and to move our democracy. So, but just like everything in this country, we are super divided. Things are super toxic, and every topic that we discuss seems to go the route of political discourse and into the cesspool of what our politics is today. So when we talk about the latest Marvel film, or whether it's Secret Invasion, or whether it's Wakanda Forever, or whether it's the Guardian series, or whether it's The Flash, everything has a political bent. And immediately someone will always say, I hate how political comics are. Now, like I hate how political comics are now. And I'm just like, if you're just now realizing that comics are political, reading is fundamental, and it's not fundamental to you. Because your comprehension is a little bit on the slower side, because comics have been political since the very first comic strip was born. And so in about 1700 or something like that, political satire came out, and that was essentially a comic strip, and it showed a political message. It was propaganda. Comics were used in Germany for propaganda. It's been used time and time again to convey political messages. And so, you look here, you see Superman with Ronald Reagan, and then also you see the very racist 1932 Max Fleischer Superman, where he's choking the very caricature drawn Asian guy. And it was super racist back in the day, where, the black people had like really big pronounced lips and bones and huge noses, and it was super racist, but it was also political propaganda. And then you see, obviously, Captain America and the Red Skull. I mean, you can't get any more propagandistic than that. And so there was even a series called The Super Presidents, where a few of the presidents were crime fighters. And so if you're just now coming to the realization that comic books and politics are intertwined, I suggest taking a reading comprehension course. But for me, I'm 50 years old. I grew up in the 70s and the 80s reading comic books. And early on, some of the seminal moments that I really realized that comics had a political bent was Super Friends. God bless them. God bless Hanna-Barbera. They tried so hard for representation. I mean, they tried so hard. I mean, Apache Chief, good Lord. Like, try to run that one today, right? Black Vulcan. And I'm trying to figure out why every superhero has black in it, and almost every black superhero has electric powers. Like, stop stereotyping. Like, we're not just fast and have electricity, guys. Like, come on, let us do something else. And then, we've got Samurai here with the top knot, and you've got El Dorado with this very stereotypical Mayan type deal. But their intentions were good, because they really tried to make sure that little kids like me, who grew up loving comic books but didn't see themselves represented in comic books, they didn't see themselves. And so they tried to do that. They were just very, very misguided in how they did it. And so the first comic book I ever purchased that I really got into, besides the Superman Truth, Justice, and American Way, was The Trial of the Flash. And like Flash and Eobard Thawne, they're racing around. He's going to try to kill Linda Park, and Flash snaps his neck. And I'm like, well, he did everything he could, like, that was good. But then it was justice, right? Like, he killed someone. And so he, as a hero, had to stand trial. And it's just like, wow, this is a real thing about how power is held accountable. It's a real thing. And then the first time, honestly, like, you look at the issues of race, and you look at X-Men and the allegories between the civil rights movement and mutant rights. And then the first time I ever saw the N-word written in print was Kitty Pryde, and she said it quite a few times. I'm worried about Kitty. Like, she said it a few times in the books, but yeah, those were the first times when you really got the sense that life was leading art, and art was leading life. And so comics have always been on the leading edge. They've always been there, not only just in the sense of popular culture, but also fighting for representation of marginalized groups. Whether it's women's rights, making sure that women have positive representations. I mean, honestly, I don't know how we got through having every comic book. Black canaries in fishnets and heels and a bustier fighting crime. Like, Batman's in armor. Like, he's in armor, and she's in a bustier and fishnets. Like, something is amiss here. And so you look at how women, minorities are portrayed. At one point, almost every origin story of the Black character in comics was a street kid who got saved by some white billionaire and given a chance to better their lives. And so not having these representations of positive female figures and positive affirmations of African Americans in our society, that was because the rooms and the writers didn't reflect the characters that they were writing. And so this is why, folks like Dwayne McDuffie coming along and developing, Static Shock in that universe and having one that is reflective of the genre and the culture and the people who write it has been so important. And so comics have touched on everything from women's rights to religion. I mean, you've got, Kamala Khan, and you've got Lucifer represented in comic books. You've got the Source, the one above all, Nightcrawler's a devout Christian. You've got so many times where politics and religion and other aspects come into comic books, and they actually have a place where we can have a conversation about those. But just like everything else in our society today, it gets drugged down. Like, if you've ever been in the comment section of like a YouTube video, it's like the bar scene in Star Wars, right? It's just like it's a cesspool. And so you can't really comment on how you feel about something without somebody throwing in, let's go Brandon, or, Trump 2024 or something like that. But here's the thing, like, this is supposed to be the space where we can imagine anything is possible. Like, you're supposed to be able to say, well, here's this superpowered alien that came to Earth, and now he's a hero saving everybody, but he just can't be black or gay or transgender. Like, literally shape-shifting alien, but he can't be trans. It doesn't make sense, because somebody's going to be offended because they're not centered in the politics. And so everything that I've ever, it's almost like, how the Simpsons always predict stuff. Like, comic books they've done that. Like, I remember like the Legacy virus and the Amazo virus in DC and Marvel. And what do we have in 2019? We had a pandemic, like, with a crazy virus. And, and then we had, obviously the nationalistic things, like every comic took on 9/11, every hero, villain, everyone was in, at the ground zero in New York. And it was those nationalist undertones that came forth in the writing. Like, it reflected popular culture, and it galvanized us to some extent, but, nothing ever really lasts long, because we go back to our respective ideological corners. And so, for me, particularly speaking as an African-American male, like, I didn't see really my first real superhero till Jon Stewart in about the 70s. And then Storm came along, and then I really got into Black Panther. And so I didn't really see those. And then as we got later into the 80s and 90s, it started to be a little bit more prevalent that I saw myself in comics. And that's the one thing about politics that a lot of people that we're fighting today. We're fighting to make sure that we maintain representation. We're trying not to push people back into the closet. We're trying to make sure accurate history is being taught. We're trying to make sure that kids have an opportunity to be able to learn about our history and then make choices for themselves. But because we're so divided, we're trying to rewrite history. I just did an episode, latest episode, on the Flash movie, and how Barry goes back in time and he tries this flashpoint. He tries to reset that. And we look at the legislation that's just passed. We look at Supreme Court justice decisions, and they're rolling back 50 half centuries of precedent. They're trying to rewrite the Civil Rights era. The VRA, Voting Rights Act, provisions 4 and 5 got gutted. You got the Dobbs decision that rolled back Roe. You just had affirmative action roll back. And so they're essentially trying to undo the Civil Rights era. And if they get their hands on it, they're going to undo the New Deal when it comes to Social Security and Medicare. And so they're trying to undo like the last century of political progress. And so when we talk about reality warping and going back in time and resetting things, it's not just in comic books. Like, literally through political power, you're able to rewind and erase people and all the progress that they've been able to make. And so this is why, honestly, as a legislator, as someone who's worked on more than 50 campaigns in my life, I understand how important it is to be able to make sure that people don't lose the power to affect their communities. And so thank you so much. I appreciate that. But comic books are so pivotal in how young people are able to feel themselves represented in our society. I mean, you think about this. The first openly gay character in comics was North Star in X-Men. And then we've got now we've got trans represented on TV. Dreamer, Natalie Maines played Dreamer on the Supergirl as a trans woman. And then, this is the one that really set people ablaze. John Kent came out as bisexual. Like, oh my God. And there was one of the super folks who was, they played Superman. I mean, I don't know how y'all feel about him, but he came out and said Superman can't be gay. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry. Yeah, and he said Superman can't be gay, and I was like, dude, he's not real. Like, he's not real. He can literally be anything. Like, he can fly to the end of the universe, and you worried about he can't be gay. Like, it's really the sad part about it is that we can't imagine, because we're so ideologically arrogant that we can't imagine that even the characters that are portrayed, they have to be exactly like us, or we're offended, or everything's woke. I am so tired of hearing that damn word. Like, it's a noun and a verb and woke. Like, every single time you hear something, it's woke legislation, it's woke judges, it's woke this, and we don't even understand what it means. And we're actually making laws, and we're affecting popular culture, and we're fighting against artistry and creativity because we think that it's somehow going to change our kids. I'm going to tell you right now, I grew up on Looney Tunes, and I ain't never dropped an anvil on anybody's head. All right? Like, I've never, tried to solve my, like shoot a 12-gauge shotgun in my brother's face to see if his head would spin around. I didn't do any of that. And I mean, think about all the things that we witnessed at Looney Tunes. Like, everybody dressed in drag. Like, Bugs Bunny was in drag every episode. And Jesus Christ, Pepe Le Pew was rapey. Like, he was just he was like sexually assaulting everybody. And like, we didn't all grow up to like become like, like assaulters. Like, it didn't happen. And we watch this every day. So the idea that we can't disseminate information and have it not change who we are fundamentally is just weird. And so, we're having this conversation about representation, and comic books they're fighting the good fight, because everywhere else in our country, lawmakers are fighting to push us back. And so if we don't have some medium, some platform to be able to say to kids, it's okay. You're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. You're a good person. If we don't have that, if kids can't see themselves reflected, then we're going to take a step back, a generation back. And so, but there's always backlash. Like, you remember, like in Asia, when Black Panther debuted, I see you in the back. Wakanda forever, my brother. I see Black Panther in the back. And so when it debuted in South Korea and China, they covered up Chadwick Boseman's face because they didn't want to show a Black character. This is what you see on the right is the American release photo, and what you see on the left is what they showed in Asia, is what they showed in China and South Korea. They didn't show Halle Bailey, the Little Mermaid. They didn't show that because she was not the typical white Ariel. And so, like, even now, like, as representation happens, this is Bitterroot. It's a really great indie comic, and they just recently did a Juneteenth episode, and it caught flack and backlash. I mean, Juneteenth is recognizing the days that the last slaves in this country got their freedom, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. And Bitterroot, there's now a national flag, and Bitterroot did a story on it. And I mean, even now, you know, My Adventures with Superman, which is a really cute little anime style story, they racially swapped Jimmy Olsen, right? He's now a brown kid. And every single time that you see comments on it, it's like, well, why did you have to change him? Well, why the hell not? You know, what's it matter if Jimmy Olsen is brown? It wouldn't matter if Superman was brown. It didn't matter is because, you know, it's a character. It's Superman is a mantle. You know, there's a bunch of different Superman out there that you can talk about, whether it's Calvin Ellis or Val Zod or anybody else that you can talk about. Superman can be anybody. Now, don't get me wrong. There's some characters that I think there's such the aspects of their makeup and their origin are so seminal that I don't think you should mess with. Like, I honestly would really oppose anybody changing Magneto's backstory. Like, I'd hate that. Like, I'd really hate that. I mean, because, you know, if as a survivor of the Holocaust, it is just pivotal to who he is. Now, I don't give a damn about Charles Xavier. Like, you can be anything. Like, you know, he can be Kenyan. I don't really care. But Magneto, you have to keep that. Like, that is a huge part of who that character is and how they came to be. So, you know, for me, I just say, like, as you continue to dig into politics, as you continue to dig in, think about those communities. Think about when you have conversations with your families and friends, who you can have and stand up for. The motto of our podcast is, you don't have to be superhuman to be a superhuman, right? You can be good to somebody. You can be good to people. You have the power to be positive. Because here's the thing, like, if we don't stay vigilant, some crazy shit can happen. Like, really. I mean, honestly, Trump was the reason this podcast actually took off. I'm going to tell you guys a story. So when I was talking to my friend about it, about how, you know, politics often is reflected in comic books, I said, you know, she said to me, like, hey, I can't believe we elected this guy. I said, well, you know, there's comic book precedents, right? Like, Lex Luthor became president in Superman comics. I said, but the difference is, like, he divested from LexCorp. You know, like, he at least, like, can you imagine being less ethical than a comic book supervillain? Like, can you imagine being less ethical? Like Trump didn't even stop running his business out of the Oval Office. And so Lex at least had the good sense to be worried about emoluments clauses. But, you know, that's how funny it is. And, like, you look at, like, how Trump literally saw Barack Obama as this Superman that he had to take down, so much so that he ran for president to do it. And so it was really life reflecting art. And so that's kind of how we got here, folks. And what I want to do with the remainder of our time is really open up the floor for questions. I'm glad y'all got that, man. I'm glad y'all got that last pen. Like, y'all my people. I am home. Like, I am home. I'm glad y'all got that last slide. So questions. Anybody want questions? Please come forward. I think there's a mic right here. I want to make sure that you guys, my guy, top notch. My guy, top notch. I love it. Yes, sir.
I did have a question about, like, the
Yep.
racial swap for
Yep.
Johnny Storm and
Yeah.
the recent-ish Fantastic Four, and I kind of was, like, a little conflicted about it.
Yeah.
His origins.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to know, like, what you were feeling about him just being racially swapped while his sister was still Caucasian.
Yeah, I think
Caucasian.
I think they really wanted Michael B. Jordan as an actor to carry that because he was such a popular actor. But the script was so bad. And, like, the script was so bad. There was no, like, you could have had Laurence Olivier in those roles, and it wouldn't have saved it. Like, it was a really strong cast, but I think what they tried to do was they tried to modernize it. They tried to bring it up and use the power of a very popular actor to carry that film. But there's only so much you can do with the source material before you lose people. And, like, honestly, what they did to Dr. Doom in that film was tragic. it was tragic. It was abomination. The only thing I hate more than what they did to Doctor Doom in that movie was what they did to the Mandarin in Iron Man 3. That's the only thing I hate more. That's the only thing I hate more. That's the only thing that's more unforgivable than what they did to Doctor Doom in the Fantastic Four movie. So I think overall, I think he played the character well. And to be honest with you, just a brash kind of, cocky type of a dude. That's just who Johnny Storm is. He's a daredevil. He's a hothead. And so that's reflected in the powers that he gained from the cosmic radiation. And so they tried it. It just didn't work. Right. Yeah. So I don't watch that film ever. So if that tells you how I feel about it, I don't ever watch that film. And if someone gave that to me as a gift, we would no longer be friends. But that's how I feel about it. They tried it. It was a good effort, but it just didn't fly.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks, bro. Absolutely. Great costume, man.
Thank you.
Yeah. Please. Yeah.
So my question is surrounding like the history surrounding how politics is often interacted with art, because I remember going back to how you mentioned politics and comics, even then propaganda in the form of politics going back to the 1700s. I remember watching a little video talking about Georgian fashion, and they did a propaganda, and propaganda was about that, where women had those elaborate wigs, and they talked to, like, if the naval battle was done by the British Navy, the women would have ships done on their hair and that sort of thing. And I wanted to know how far this goes back, because when I was thinking about it, I'm a very big Shakespeare fan.
Sure.
But even then, I understood that some of it was questionable. Like, if you look at Othello, Othello is a great character, and no one really knows why Iago really went after him. But a lot of people just assume that Iago was probably racist, and there are racist allegations against Othello.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why Desdemona's father doesn't want her marrying him. But there are other racial, there are a couple of other racial characters where the race is either included or it's implied. And for those other cases that I found, none of them were racially positive. They were really racially negative. So the same for Jews in The Merchant of Venice. So my question to you is, how far do you think this conversation could really go back if we wanted to look at art in general?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think as far as the ability for people to communicate through written word or art, I think it goes back that far. When you the one thing that we have now, I mean, we've had this pendulum, right, where we had to draw things because we didn't have photos, and then we had photos that could capture lifelike images, and now we have AI that can create lifelike images. And so now what we look at is the power to shape opinions, right? We look at the power to change reality. So when we think about folks like Franklin Richards, and we think about folks like Mad Jim Jaspers, and we think about those folks who carry this reality warping power to be able to change reality, Wanda Maximoff, to be able to change reality as they see fit. This is what we have now with the ability to caricaturize folks in written and art, right? And so we want to shape people's opinions of what we think. Like, you think about Othello and Iago, it wasn't hard, because Othello being a Moor, being a darker skinned folks, you're automatically, folks were afraid of, I mean, his stature and everything, his voice, his power. And so it wasn't easy. It wasn't hard to make folks afraid of him. You just had to sow a little bit of doubt. And so this is what you do when you control the power of the pen, right? When you can write things about folks, when you can present folks in a different way, like how they used to draw Jews back in the day, darker skin, very menacing type looks, and it made people afraid of them. And so as long as people have had opinions, and as long as people were able to perceive information, the ability to change people's opinion through art and comics has existed. And so it can go back as far as being able to put pen to paper. Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Chris.
Hey, Chris.
I do think it's interesting we brought up Othello, and ironically, the best rendition of him ever was Laurence Olivier.
Absolutely.
Blackface,
Absolutely.
right?
That's,
Like,
hey, man.
it's
Hey,
kinda
absolutely.
But the thing that I wanted to bring up is I had an experience, and I just kind of want your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at comics, right, and I'm seeing characters be drawn,
Yeah.
it drives me nuts when artists put the same generic face on every character, right? There's no effort made sometimes, and you see all sorts of times. A really good example of this is Psylocke being drawn with the same face as every other character, right? And yet she's supposed to be Asian.
Well, she's actually transracial.
Well,
You know, you think about it. Betsy Braddock started out as a British woman.
she's
and they,
not in the Betsy Braddock body, so
right.
she's supposed to look Asian.
Exactly.
I had an experience, and so, to me, I thought, okay, well, this makes sense. If I'm doing a jam piece or something like this at a con, I love buying art or getting a commission done, right? If I talk to somebody that shares that background, they're going to be able to capture the essence of those ethnicities and the details, right? Like I remember seeing a version of Psylocke that David Nakayama did, and he's from Hawaii, right? And so tons of Asians, right? And so, and I remember as I was putting together this jam piece, there was an artist that I talked to. The guy was a black guy, and I made a comment about him adding Storm, and I thought that he would be able to capture Storm really well. And he took some offense to that. And I was kind of surprised, and I just kind of felt like it was this moment where it was kind of like, you damned if you do and you damned if you don't, and you just sometimes with these political issues within society and culture, it just seems like there's no way to get the right answer, even when you try to be sincere. And so I wanted to tee you up with that, and then one other thought is, do you have any issue with the fact that with a lot of the race swaps in characters throughout pop culture, that it always seems to be that the black actors are replacing redheaded characters?
Oh my God, I've heard it. I've heard this.
Who are more genetically rare than folks that are black, right? Like redheads only make up 2% of the population.
Hey, thank you for that. Thank you for both those questions.
That was the question I've been waiting for.
Yeah, like actually, I'll take that one first. Like honestly, I think there is I think there's a kind of an unspoken, like who's the last group that we can pick on, right? Like who's the last group that we can pick on? Like we can't go after, we can't necessarily visibly go after black people or Jews or so who's the group that we can pick on? And I think that, and I think the idea is that there's been so few black characters, and for some reason there was a dearth of red-headed characters, like a lot of them, like Jean Grey, and it was so many red-headed characters. Like, well, you're not gonna miss one or two if they go, right? Like you're not gonna miss one or two. And so I think what's happening now is that we're so hypersensitive to things like that if we have a character that we've traditionally followed and they race swap them, it's like, hey, you're taking it from me, And so we don't look at the totality of it. Look, I certainly am for creating new characters. I think it keeps the industry fresh. I think it keeps the genre fresh. I think it allows for the writers to be able to expand their creative minds, to come up with new power sets and new scales and things of that nature. Like I really think that's what should happen. But I think in terms of time frame, I think they don't want to do it. I think it takes so long to get a character to print and into the public consciousness. They don't want to take the time to do it. So it's so much easier to take a character that exists with a backstory and just swap them. Like you remember like Wallace West? Like you remember y'all remember when Wallace West came out and everybody was like, well, damn, y'all took Wally, another redhead, right? And like now he's black. And so I think it's the time that it takes to get a character into the public consciousness that they don't want to do. So it's easier to race swap. Now, your earlier question, And if you want
about people drawing
Yes.
characters that have a shared race
Yes.
and not being able to feel like you can find the right balance.
Right. And I think what happens is that artists are very temperamental and they say, well, look, I should, artists are very temperamental and they don't want to be pigeonholed, right? Like I'm a black artist. I'm an artist who happens to be black. I'm not a black artist. And so I should be able to draw any character if I had the skill to do it. Now, to your point, I think the issue is when you run into folks who are not surrounded by a community to give them guidance. Because honestly, like I just read a What If where Miles Morales becomes Thor, and it sounded like a blaxploitation film, like jive, turkey, sucker, like, you know, it was awful. And I was like, there was no black people in the room. There was no black people in the writer's room. Like, there's no way this would have gotten past black people. Yeah, the power of my faith. Like he literally, yes, it was that awful. And that's what I'm saying. Like there was nobody in the room to be able to do that, to be able to proof that and say, look, you know, we don't say that, bro. Like we don't talk like that. Like, but in the sense of when you're talking about representation visually, you need to have folks who understand the nuances of how a race looks, because you would have thought the only hairstyle black people had was either bald or a shag, like for the longest time, like because the folks who were drawing black people couldn't understand the nuance of black hair. And so like if you guys have seen like the pictures that I've shown of myself here, you can see like that's my secret identity. I can change my hair really quickly. So like I go from the fade to braids, like, and so that's one thing that's nuanced in our community is like our hair. And when you don't have folks in the room, you miss that. And it alienates readers from that community because you're like, yo, like we either have an afro or we're bald, or, you know, we have very tiny eyes or very, very big eyes, you know, so it's the nuance that I think is not there if you don't have folks in the room.
So do you think that it would be considered discriminatory if somebody that's an editor-in-chief of Marvel is assigning characters that have their own books, people like Sam Wilson and Miles Morales, and they're assigning them to Black, Hispanic artists? Do you think that they would get backlash on that and say, well, why do you only give these characters to a Black artist?
Yeah, and so I think in a way, there are a lot of folks who work on every book, right? So I think your team has got to be diverse. Like outside of my public life, I work in corporate America, like in human resources. And so I understand like diversity, equity, inclusion is a real thing. And why do you have it? Is because if you have folks from the same background and same experience, you're going to get the same type of thoughts and same ideas and the same outcomes. Like it's just a group think type of a thing. You cannot avoid it. And even if you have folks who have generally different ideas about problem solving, eventually your learned experiences are going to bring you to the same place. And it's just sociology. It's just how things work. And so this is why having a team of diversity, like when they did that what if with Miles, like they should have just literally called up any Black person they knew and was like, hey, listen to this. And it would have stopped immediately. It would have never gotten out of the room. Like no matter what, like and I think that's what they have to do. Like they have to have the leads as people from that community, but then fill in, because guess what? Each one teach one. Because what happens is that team understands from those folks how to view things, and it helps everybody grow. So yeah, I think they should do it, but I think they should diversify those teams. Yeah. Cool Katsu, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on the Comic Codes of America? Do you think it overall hurt or helped the comic book industry in general after it first came out? Because from what I read, like what comic books were wildly popular, like even in World War II. But then after the Comic Codes of America, I mean, it got a negative rap.
Yeah.
Because of some psychologists that said, "Oh, it's worse than Hitler." Comic books, and then what's it called? Comic Code in America heard, and everything got tamer until I would say 1990s and 2000s.
Yeah.
And even DC abandoned the Comic Codes of America back in 2011, I believe.
Yeah, I think here's the thing, and I'm someone who's a firm believer in that there's a positive role that government can play, but there's just some things that government shouldn't do. And I think one of the things is regulating art and free speech to a degree where you try to drive a message. And I think that's what happened with the comic codes. It's like, hey, we need this nationalism. We need to make this homogenous message that comes out of all comics. And what happens is folks are turned off by that because guess what? If I don't feel that way, I'm not going to read that. If I feel like I'm being manipulated, I'm not going to read that. If I feel like you're trying to indoctrinate me, I'm going to reject it. And so I think one of the things that we have to do is this is the last kind of the bastion of creativity. This is where you should be able to have the imagination to imagine anything. And so when you get into a point where you're saying that a comic has to check this box, and this box, then what you do is you limit the creativity and the imagination of the authors and the writers. And so for me, I think it was heavy-handed, and I think whatever mission that they had with the comic codes, it wasn't for the benefit of the genre or the community. And I think it almost killed the comic industry. So I'm not a supporter of that because I think art and artists, they should be guided by creativity and not necessarily someone telling them what they have to say in the message.
Final question.
Sure.
Do you think there would ever be a non-straight Superman if the comic code was still being followed by DC?
No,
You think it would've been denied? You think it would've been straight up denied?
not a chance. Not a chance. I mean, think about this. We just went from Truth, Justice, and American Way to Truth, Justice, and A Better Tomorrow, right?
Yep.
Like, and what happened? Literally meltdown across the spectrum. Like, you hate America, like you're a commie because you want to. And like, to me, Superman is, I always say this, and folks get mad at me when I talk about Superman, and he's my favorite character to this day. But Superman is an illegal immigrant who had an anchor baby who just turned out to be gay. Like, you think about it. Like, seriously, he's an illegal immigrant. He came here. He didn't have any papers. He was taken in. He married an Earth woman, and he had an anchor baby. And so, he's a DACA kid. I mean, let's be honest. So he's everything that a lot of people hate, but you put him forward because he presents as a very powerful white male. And so that's why I think when you try to change Superman, it's almost like you're trying to change America. It's like when you criticize Superman, it's like you're criticizing America. And I love him, but he's the archetype of what we are. Like, we see ourselves as Superman, but the rest of the world sees us as Homelander, like, and so we got to deal with that. We got to deal with that. But thank you for the question. Great question. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about really the role of companies when it comes to both promoting progressive ideas, but also capitalizing on them. For example, Disney.
Yeah.
We have a Black Little Mermaid.
Sure.
We're going to have a Hispanic Snow White.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to Marvel, they fired Ike Perlmutter, who was one of the main people who was getting in the way of making the Black Panther and Black Widow movies. But at the same time, you have what Bob Iger said recently about the writer's strike and the actor's strike. So when it comes to getting these progressive ideas out of inclusiveness and diversity, and yet there's still sort of the dark aspect of they're still about the money and making sure that the bottom line is what's important to them.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, and we just recently saw backlash when companies try to expand their markets, right? You saw the Bud Light controversy with the trans person on the can. Like, it was like, did you think it was going to turn you gay when you sipped it? Like that's kind of dumb. Like, you've been drinking that beer for forever, and you think just because the trans person's on the can is going to affect you. But you saw the backlash to that because there's certain things where folks believe that it's forced, right? And instead of accepting the idea that trans people exist in our society and deserve to be seen, it's almost like you're forcing this thing down my throat. But companies understand that, being closed off hurts your bottom line, like because you're segregating large parts of the population that you can make money from. So it's not really progress and progressive ideals in the sense of being progressive. It's more like I need more people to sell stuff to. So I'm going to open up the markets so I can get a larger market share of folks coming in. And so I think in some degrees it works out, right? And then some degrees really hurt Bud Light, already so fixed. Like, liberals doesn't really drink Bud Light, and so you had a captive audience. And so when they tried to do that, it backfired. But you look at things like Dick's Sporting Goods, when they stopped carrying shotguns, their stock went up. When you look at, Nike, when they stood behind Colin Kaepernick, their stock went up. When you look at, Keurig and folks who did Pride, their stock went up. Why? Because they had a broader audience and folks felt included in their marketing campaign. So progress, yes, but I think it's also just good business, because the more people that you open up your market to, the more opportunity you have to make money. And so I don't know if it's an altruistic, like benevolent type of a move, but hey, whatever gets us there, right? And so the more times that we can have people out in our community that feel seen and represented and have opportunities to be seen and represented, I think the better. And however we get there, I think it's cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say, I don't normally go to these things.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot, actually.
Oh, great.
It's really been, I guess, helpful to see it from a different perspective than
Sure.
I normally do in my friend
Sure.
group. But I was wondering what your specific thoughts were about the color changing of specific stories that have to do with specifically like white culture, such as recently in the news it came out that the actress that's going to play Astrid in the new How to Train Your Dragon movie is going to be, can't remember if it was mixed or black, but I was wondering what your thoughts were specifically as like the Norse, that whole area, and traditionally is very white.
Yeah, and I think to some degree, because you had Valkyrie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Valkyrie was changed. Tessa Thompson played Valkyrie, and I don't think anybody. And then Heimdall was Idris Elba. So I think it's just really kind of dramatic license. And I think if you say, because you can't really think about like Wakanda and think that you're going to see like, very blonde haired, blue eyes people running through Wakanda. And so that's just not really a thing. And so I think there's I think you do have some abilities to make sure that you are as accurate as possible. Okay. So I don't think anybody would really be up in arms if you didn't change How to Train Your Dragon. Like, I don't think anybody would. And I think, depending on what they were looking for from the range of the actress, maybe whoever auditioned for that was the best actor. Yeah. Like the casting director for Little Mermaid said, Halle Bailey walked in first, and they really could have sent everyone else home, because she walked in, and the first time a note came out of her mouth, they was like, that's it. Yeah. And so she just happened to be, a very caramel colored, young woman. And so I think if you're casting the best actress or actor, I think that is one thing. But if you're just trying to say, I'm gonna find someone to update and modernize the story, I think you have to look at the story overall and see, does it really fit? Because if you don't have more than just her, then it looks forced. Yeah. And so I think that's the thing. Like, the environment of the movie has to be reflective of a change. Like, you look at Asgard and in the Marvel films, like it's diverse. Yeah. It's diverse. So it wasn't a stretch when Tessa Thompson played Valkyrie, because you look around through the city of Asgard and it's diverse. And so nobody really had a big idea. But if you have, one brown actress in a sea of blonde Vikings, then it's gonna feel forced to everyone. And I don't think you accomplish the goal that you're trying to do. Yeah. Thank you so much. Of course, absolutely. Yeah, come on. Yeah.
So you talked about it a second ago,
Mhm.
and I don't feel super qualified to talk about this, but
Then you fit in with every politician that exists.
thank you.
Yeah.
So black role models for
Mhm.
like black kids in America, and pretty much everywhere actually in comics.
Yeah.
I'd say right now the main one that comes to mind when people think about that is Miles, just because of
Sure.
all the stuff that's happened recently. He's become a lot more popular.
Mhm.
Do you think that even with his his Venom blast, I think is what he
Yeah,
calls it most
yeah.
of the time, that's an electric power. That's that's grouping him in with all that. But do you feel like even with that,
Yeah.
He keeps enough uniqueness, and do you think that he is a good role model for that? And adding on to that, if not, is there somebody better? Is there somebody that you would recommend to a kid that wants to start getting into comic books?
Yeah.
That you could just a character you'd be able to point out. That
Yeah, I think Miles is great. I think Miles is great because he has a unique set of skills, like his abilities to become invisible. Yeah, the Venom blast is kind of stereotypical, but look, it's a power set that traditionally Peter Parker didn't have, right? And so I think that gives him some delineation away from the original character. But like you think about how far you go with like Miguel O'Hara in 2099, like that guy's a beast, man. Like speed, strength, the venom, these fangs. Like this guy's a beast. Like and he's a Hispanic, Afro-Hispanic guy. And so so I think as long as you make some effort to show some distinction between the characters, I think it's fine. I think Miles is a great character. I would always recommend someone to check out Virgil Hawkins' Static Shock. If you're going to get into if you're a young black kid and you want to get into that, you really start with Static Shock. And I'm so glad that we're going to get some material coming from there. Jaime Reyes' Blue Beetles coming out. So I think that's going to be fantastic. I can't wait. So there's some really cool young people to be able to get behind that show representation positively. And I think, Miles has a great family structure. Jaime has a great family structure. And so I think that's a really cool place to start if young kids are looking for role models.
And even with, but you mean most main Miles, not the what if.
Yeah. So like honestly, like if I ever see the folks who wrote that, like they're gonna catch hands, like on site. Like we're going, like it's on site, man. Like you really did. Because honestly, I love Thor too. Like I love Thor. Like I really love where they've gone with Thor now with the All Father, Odin Force and Power Cosmic and he's like OP with the Venom, with the Phoenix Force and everything. I love that. Like I love seeing characters like reach a crazy OP level, like Action Comics 1050, like Superman come back from War World and he's juiced. And I've been fighting for that for years because I feel like they nerfed it. But I love that. But that guy, like that what if Miles, like that's gotta go. Like he's not worthy. So he needs to put the hammer down. Like whatever.
So he's a good role model in the right situation.
Yeah, in the right situation, I think if you guys see the Spider-Verse movies, like that Miles is a really, really good role model. He's respectful of his parents. He's really about his community. He takes his job and his role as Spider-Man seriously. He really honors his mentor and the legacy that Peter left. And I think those are values. Those are core values. And that's one of the things of the underpinnings that should cut through the toxicity of politics is that there's a core values in politics. There's justice and there's helping out those who are weaker. Like that's what heroes are supposed to do. And they're not bullies and they're not, imperialists or anything like that. Even though they do go into other people's countries without asking. But it's to help people. It's for good reasons. And so those are the core values that I can't, for the life of me, understand that how it got so consumed in this toxic mess that we're in right now, because this should be the space where we can have a conversation like we're having tonight and our personal beliefs come into it. We just go back and forth about what we feel about the best thing about the character. So thank you. Yeah. See, we talk Miles up. Look. Yeah. See?
Not up here to talk about it.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of a loaded question.
Sure.
But the X-Men have just recently had they got Krakoa going
Oh,
on.
yeah, yeah.
They just recently had a shakeup in like the past week's issue.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people did not like how they handled it, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have been asking for more diversity in the X-Men team, and they finally get diversity,
Mm-hmm.
and something
Yeah.
happened, right?
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, how do you feel like the X-Men can be handled to where, because it's widely known that they're like an allegory for POCs, and how do they get to a place where they're more famous stories and they're more infamous stories aren't solely about bigotry and always having to get, because they have the resurrection thing now,
Mm-hmm.
but I kind of feel like some of the writers are using it as a tool to be like, okay, we can kill off boom, 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 and then not do anything. So,
Yeah, I think what happens is when you have a title that's so steeped and it's so intertwined with like a societal issue, like sometimes you feel like you can do almost anything with that, and that anything's acceptable because folks understand what that means. But what they miss is that folks don't always understand what that means.
Yeah.
And so like Krakoa is one of those things, like we're having this national debate about reparations, right? Like we're having this debate about how do we make communities that suffered whole. And like one of the things that was promised, after the Civil War was like 40 acres and a mule, like give me this land back so that we can make the best of what we wanted. So there was this idea that we were going to integrate and society was going to be great, and it didn't happen. And so if you look at how, and honestly, like a lot of folks will always have this thing that, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were allegories for Professor X and Magneto, right?
absolutely.
And so how do we have this peaceful integration or we have separate but equal?
Right.
And I think there was this idea with Krakoa that, hey, we gave it our level best. Humans are just not going to accept us. And so we got to go off and do our own thing. But you got to understand is that power is one of those things that can upend anything. And so the struggle internally, and like you have debates within the Black community about things like reparations. Some folks say we don't want it, and other folks say, yeah, we need it. People are not a monolith. The mutants, even though they're different from humans, are not a monolith. And so I think when you're trying to write things like that, like you have to be able to cover the spectrum of how people feel. And I think that arc started off really strong.
Yeah.
And they tried to do something because, you do have popular characters. It's all good, bro. And so you have like folks who are demanding things like, oh, I'd love to see this character. And you have an outcry. And so you try to fix everything, but you can't do it without destroying the integrity of the story. And so what happens is it takes about one page or one half of a book to ruin the experience of a really super, just happened in room. And now you can't think about how great the other, 10 or so issues were. You think about how bad this one ends. And so I think honestly, the continuity between the writers, that's something that you also have to think about as well, because another writer can come on and take it in a completely different way. Like honestly, recently, I forget his name. He did a run of Black Panther, and it was John. Yes, and it was so bad in how they portrayed T'Challa. And so it's this guy is like persona non grata in the community because it's like you really took down a pivotal character in the community, and so it's really about the writer and how they see. Because if not, then you can really lose your audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Folks, I think it's 10 o'clock. I don't know what time this is in. Hey, like I'm like Cap. I can do this all day. But
the next panel, you're good.
10:05.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you a hard question. Are we good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I suppose that you would be fully in support of like interracial couples and comics and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I know I will be. I come from an interracial
Sure.
couple. And one day I think that our world is going to exist with everyone looking like a beautiful tan, right?
Yeah.
So would you have an issue as Wakanda becomes more integrated into the world if you have an interracial relationship that produces a child that one day rules Wakanda, and that child looks white.
Yeah, I don't have a problem. I wouldn't have a problem with that at all. I think the issue would be, maybe amongst the tribes. Like, I think you would have like maybe that outside. I mean, because you think about it. Like, you've got Hunter in there. You've got the White Wolf. You've got him. He's part of the royal family, right? And so, if all else fails, if every member of the royal family dies, Hunter becomes the new Black Panther. He's white. And so I think in that regard, I don't think there would be an issue. But I do think when you talk about protectionism and you talk about xenophobia and you talk about those things, I think Wakanda Forever was a perfect allegory of xenophobia and protectionism when it comes to like geopolitics, right? Like, you've got these two powerful nations that don't want to be bothered because they understand how dangerous it is to have the outside world infiltrate that, and so they stay separate into themselves. I don't think because of vibranium and the power that it is, you would see that. But I certainly don't. I certainly would be against Shuri having a interracial relationship and then having a baby, or T'Challa remarrying. Even though I would cry tears that he's not with Storm. But I wouldn't have a problem with that. I just think that it would be, I think it would be a tough sell to the public.
Sure. But
yeah,
that's the problem.
Yeah, and that's
like,
and that
it shouldn't be a tough sell.
No, it shouldn't. You're absolutely right. It should not be a tough sell. But I think when we talk about on either side of the issue, there's a certain purity aspect that folks, and I hate that word, there's a certain purity aspect that folks want to keep with particular characters.
But it goes down way easier on one side than it does on the other.
And it does. And I think what happens is when I talked earlier about like there's certain characters that you should not mess with their origin. And I talked about Magneto. I think T'Challa and Wakanda are some of those characters where the origin is so pivotal to what the character is that you can't really mess with that. But that has nothing to do with generations upon generations that happen after that. So I wouldn't be mad at it, but I do think some of those saying that pendulum can swing both ways, and it would be a tough sell to the public. Yeah. Any other questions, guys? Hey, come on. I think we got a few minutes. No, you're good. You're good.
I'm skinny, so. Hey, everyone.
Hey.
My name is Alonzo. And I just had a question about, we kind of mentioned that like an allegory for mutants would be, race.
Mm-hmm.
Or another example would be like Zootopia.
Sure.
Or for the predators would be, the Black people
in
society.
Yeah.
Do you feel that that's an apt comparison? Because like when you consider mutants, like mutants are actually a threat, right? They actually have powers.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them can,
anything,
the entire universe.
Yeah, anything.
With the predators with Zootopia, they actually hunt prey. You know what I mean? They're actual threats. So do you think that that's an apt comparison?
I think anytime where you have a concentration of power, that's seen as predatory. Whether that's political power, or whether that's wealth, or whether that's physical manifestations of race. Like, if you are seen as powerful, you're seen as a threat. And so I think what's happened is because if you either set someone up as powerful to use them for their own end, or you set someone up as powerful so that you can have machinations to control them. And so one of the things that you do is you can scare people by saying, oh, look at this, very powerful mutant who can just walk into your house and take anything from you. We've got to control that person. And that was done to Black people after slavery. And it was done to justify brutality. So when you think about the race massacres that happened in this country, it happened because they set Black people up as predators. There was either a white woman or something that was accusing someone of physical assault that justified the culling of neighborhoods like Tulsa and Rosewood, Florida, and Wilmington, North Carolina, and places like that, because they set this person up as powerful. Like, look at how they describe like black athletes. You know, look, he's a beast. He's, you know, oh, he's an animal. He's got that dog in him. But then you look at how they describe white athletes. Oh, he's heady and he's scrappy and he's, you know, and it's a very different thing. And it's like one denotes power, the other denotes intellect. And so you have this juxtaposition between the two. And sometimes people feel justified in treating one way and treating one another. And so I think when you have that dichotomy in comic books, I think that's how the Friends of Humanity, that's how, you know, Trask and Stryker, that's why, you know, they went and got Tony Stark to help with the Sentinels, because we've got to have something powerful enough to be able to stand against these mutants, because if not, they're going to overrun us. And so it's either I'm going to set you up as powerful to use you for your own end, or I'm going to set you up as powerful to control you by making people fear you. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I had a question.
Sure.
A lot of the talk that's been going on has been about race and the allegories behind race swapping.
Yeah.
And I was thinking how it related to a comic that I read, The Visions.
Yeah.
And how many of the scenes in the comic depicted what I want to call racism.
Yeah.
If that's even the correct word, because of the context.
Certainly.
And specifically the fact that within the comic, you could see that people of all races united in the treatment that was portrayed to the Vision family.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask for your thoughts. What do you think causes that kind of vicious cycle?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I think if there's someone that's so different and someone that's so outside of the full traditional aspect of what a group is, like there's a certain human. This is a very diverse room, right? We're different ages, we're different races, we're different sexes, we're different heights, colors, everything. But we all mostly have 2 eyes and 10 fingers and 10 toes, and like we're human, right? So when you have something that's far outside of that, that's a galvanizing force. Like the Friends of Humanity was a very diverse group. Like, you know, like they were very diverse, but they hated mutants. Why? Mutants had that one thing that separated them from humanity. The Visions, androids, you know, whatever it may be, they were not human. And so it was able to galvanize all of humanity, even over their differences, against them. Like, there's nothing that this country loves more than an out group. We love to hate that group, right? And so you see it even now when you talk about the LGBT community. It unites those in the faith community. Like, it can be Southern Baptist, or it can be, Black, African American Episcopals. It unites them against the LGBT community. So a lot of times those similarities, if you have something that's so outside the mainstream, it will unite them against that person. That's what happened with the Visions. Right. Yeah. Oh, I'm over time. I'm done, guys. But guys, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this, guys. I really appreciate it. My first con ever, so I really appreciate you guys being kind. Hey, and we'll see you maybe next time. All right, thanks.
If anyone would like to talk outside with the panelists, please do so outside. We need to clear the room immediately.